Welcome, welcome, welcome to the village. Welcome, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Hope you guys had a wonderful Memorial Day weekend and you are ready to get this week started. We're happy because it is June 1st, so to all the teachers, educators, woo, we made it to June.
Never would have made it.
Right, just a few more days. So again, welcome, welcome, welcome to the village. We have an exciting topic for today and for Thursday as well. We have a part 2. But we're talking about promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, the LGBT plus edition. That's right. June is Pride Month, and we're going to take time out to ask the tough questions because we want to make sure that our school cultures are engaging for all students and families. So we want to hear from you. What are your questions and your concerns as it relates to engaging our LGBT plus students and families? All right, so be sure to put your questions in the comments. Well, again, welcome. I'm Dr. Roz, CEO and founder of the Village Leadership Group, and
I am Coach Williams. Y'all know me.
and we are the Village Leadership Group, where we coach teacher leaders to maximize their strengths, develop leadership skills, and reignite their passion for teaching so that they can have a greater impact in their schools and communities. So, again, welcome to the village. We want to have our guests to come on in. So, guests, we have so many of you. Just come on. Welcome to the village. Woo! We are excited. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have several panelists, as you guys can see, because we wanted to make sure we had some experts to bring their wisdom and experiences to the village. All right? Because we want to learn from the best. So that's what we did today. So for all of my panelists, I would love for you to introduce yourselves to the village. And then, why did you say yes today? Why did you want to be a part of this panel? What is that one thing that you want to make sure everyone take away from today's discussion? All right, so we're going to start with Dr. Goodcross. Is that all right? Why did you say yes?
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm David Goodcross. I run a small group practice specializing in LGBTQ folks of color outside of Baltimore, East Towson Psychological Services. And so I said yes because this is a community that I feel very passionate about. We work with a lot of young folks who are transitioning and navigating that within their families. And so I agreed to participate and happy to do so, to just share more information and to be a resource for families who need support.
All right, well, thank you for joining us. All right, Dr. B, what is that one thing that you want us to learn? And who are you, Dr. B?
My name is Dr. B. I'm the owner of Vision, Hope, and Healing. It's a private practice that serves youth and adults for outpatient psychological care. I also work with inpatient hospital facilities doing assessments for suicidal youth and managed care organizations. So I joined today because I think it's very important for our voices to be heard. I am a member of the LGBT community, and I do find that a lot of our inpatient individuals coming in are struggling with issues of identity and acceptance from family and school systems. So I think it's important for us to educate and inform others. That one burning thing I would like everyone to know is that suicide is the third leading cause of death among teens. And so we definitely need to lower and reduce that number. It's 3 times as likely for LGBT members.
Wow.
That is a shocking statistic. So.
Yeah, it definitely is. So the conversation is definitely needed. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. B.
Yes, thank you.
Monet, you're next.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I'm Dr. Monet Hawkins. I'm a school counselor in the Prince George's County Public Schools. One of the reasons why I said yes to be a part of the panel is I think it's important to have these courageous conversations. As a member of the LGBT community, I think it's important to have these conversations early the sooner the better, and for them to be ongoing conversations. And a takeaway that I would have, or I would want everyone to have, is that it is an ongoing conversation, and there are ongoing learning experiences. So take this conversation and build upon it, because the LGBTQ experience is not a monolithic. There are, various ways to see it, various experiences, and people need to, to start the conversation to understand, how to continue to help and to support people.
Yes, exactly. And Mr. Devin.
All right, good evening. Yes, good evening, everyone. My name is Devin Tillman. I am now I have started my own private tutoring service. So I've just recently become an entrepreneur where I do specialize 3rd through 5th English language arts. I do have a 17-year experience within the elementary school sector. Very proud of that, where I encourage my students at the B school to be proud, to be bold, be anything but practical and boring. And so I think that's very profound in today's discussion. As a member of the community myself, I said yes because it's very important for everyone to understand that greatness comes in different forms. And I think for myself, working in the elementary school sector, the first thing is to create that safe space to, as you know, we most commonly heard, get messy, make mistakes. And so to promote that safe space, I feel at the foundational level is very, very powerful. So that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Welcome to the village. Penny, you're up.
Yes, hi, I'm Penny Gerber. I'm a realtor by day, but 24/7, I'm a mom of Ashton. And Ashton identifies as them, they. And they came out to me back at 13 years old, so I've kind of been through the process. I guess the reason why I said yes today, and the thing I want educators to take away, is keep your eyes open and be a voice. And if you don't feel comfortable being that voice, get to know someone else in the school who could be an ally. I was lucky enough to have teachers at Ashton School that we built relationships with, and we kept in touch. If they noticed something going on with Ash, they'd reach out to me, or if I noticed something with Ash, I reached out to them, and they weren't even their teacher. So, you don't have to be their specific teacher to be the one to help and be a voice and to be, a safe space for them.
Wow. Well, thank you for being here. Ashton, go ahead.
Yeah, adding on that. So my name's Ashton. I use they, them pronouns. I've been the president of my school's GSA and then external GSA organizations pretty much throughout high school. I'm now graduating, and I came into this to kind of offer a youth perspective and a focus on trans inclusivity in schools.
Awesome. Well, welcome everyone to the village. Those of you who are joining us again, today is June 1st, and June is Pride Month. So we want to kind of pause and reflect, what type of school culture do we have? Are we making sure that all students feel included and they are engaged? And like Devin said in Ashton, do they have a safe place? Especially our students who are coming from the LGBT plus community. We want to make sure that they feel included in everything that we're doing in school. So the first thing, people may be asking, well, Dr. Ross, my school we have a diversity and inclusion committee, or, we've had some diversity training in our school. Isn't that good enough? So I want to hear from you guys, what is your definition of diversity, equity, inclusion? Let's start there. What is it? What does that mean? Can we start with Monet? Can you work in the school system? So I want to hear from you. When you hear DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, what does that mean?
I think it's a hot button term. I think sometimes it's used pretty broad in general. Sometimes the kind of, a catch-all for any and everybody. And unfortunately with the catch-all, you're going to miss most people. So sometimes I can be a little turned off by that term, because depending on who or what group is the hot group at that time to focus on, sometimes the trainings and the professional developments focus on that, with the exception of any and everybody else. that's kind of what I think about when I initially hear it. So I kind of look at it a little with a little caution.
Right.
I feel like people, in their efforts to try to include everybody, they include almost nobody sometimes.
They exclude.
Right.
Right.
It can't be too broad. So again, I love it. So what about you, Dr. Goodcross? What does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you when you hear those terms?
I think it's around, I look at it from a social justice lens. Like at its core, if we take people at their word, I think it's the idea that that the world is created with a lot of people, and not just white folks, cis folks, het folks, and men and moneyed folks get to make the rules, right? And I think that's the core of it for me. That's how I interpret it. And like Monet say, I do think that it is often co-opted and kind of thrown as a catch-all. But when I think of at its core, I think of an effort to promote social justice and in the society.
Wow. Love it. Love it. So when we talk about making sure that we're not too broad and being specific, there's a thing where people say, tolerance versus acceptance. So we get a little bit deeper, as far as diversity and inclusion. But what's the difference between being tolerant and acceptance? Dr. B, you want to jump on that?
I think the tolerance is just like the willingness to share space, right? The willingness to have others in your space versus accepting and making that space, as Devin Tillman said, having that space be inclusive and having it be safe, right? So I think that's the difference there. But I think it has a lot to do, going back to the first question, with multicultural competency, right? When we think about diversity and inclusion, we need to be culturally competent, and we need to understand that that's ever evolving. So it's going to change. Those trends that Dr. Mo mentioned, they're going to change, and we need to be aware and prepared for those changes and able to assist our students when those changes occur.
I was about to say, I like what Dr. B said. And to me, it kind of, we have to be ever evolving, but I think a lot of times teachers are scared. Educators are scared. So when we talk about tolerance and acceptance, it's like they want to walk that fine line because they don't really know what to do. So I'm so glad that we're having this conversation. Even like Monet was saying, how sometimes she can get turned off with that. And I never even thought about it. When I think of diversity, we do always talk about different races. We talk about our SPED students, and a lot of times we're not intentional with including the LGBTQ plus community. So I'm taking notes, y'all.
Definitely. So Penny and Ashton, you guys have a fortunate experience. So why do you think we need, what's your opinion as far as why we need to have this conversation and distinguish the different communities when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion? Why is this so important for us to have this specific conversation?
You want to start?
Yeah. Going back, I just want to step back for a second and I want to step back for a second and focus a little bit on the difference between acceptance versus tolerance, because I think the big word that you have to think of there is like passive versus active. I think tolerance is a very passive action that many people, I think, are willing to take because it doesn't require any energy, whereas acceptance is an active inclusion of the community. My school, I would say, began as a very passively tolerant environment. I never felt unsafe, but I also never felt seen. And that's something that I had to kind of work to improve within my environment, to create like direct inclusion of students, because I think oftentimes queer students, unless given explicit permission to be in a space, they often will hide, especially in middle school, elementary school, and the beginning stages of high school when there's that kind of period of self-exploration.
Definitely. Wow. Good. I love it. Passive. I love it. So, and again, I apologize because I feel guilty. I'm sitting here reflecting, and I can think about through my career where I know that we would just be, myself included, we were just being tolerant. And so it's so important that as teachers, we're being reflective and ask ourselves, what else can I do? What else do I need to learn? Who do I need to talk to? What resources do I need? What books do I need to read? All of that. Now,
am I being offensive?
Right, all of that. So I love that. So thank you so much, Ashton, for bringing that up. Because, like you said, many times schools are just being tolerant. So Devin, Ashton mentioned, elementary and middle school, and you work with some of the younger students. Where is this conversation happening in the elementary schools?
I'll be honest, in my experience, it doesn't. So what I try to do, I try to balance. So now I'm an adult, but I cannot lose focus of, let's be honest, when I was the young, confused gay kid and didn't know. Okay. And how that affects just my everyday. A lot of, in my experience, a lot of teachers they forget, hey, if you don't know, guess what? Maybe the kid doesn't know either, and so I go to the foundational thinkings of my grandmother. Well, every child is able to say, yes, ma'am, no, sir. And so we can get foundational things. It doesn't matter what these feelings are. We can deal with that. But I'm more focused on your social skills. Are you a good person? What habits can we possibly adapt or break? Those things. And still understanding, like, I have a lot to learn. And talking to parents and trying to keep that communication open. For me, my best practice has just been focusing on the foundational. What are we here for? Did we smile today? That's a big question I used to ask my third graders. Did we smile today? What did we laugh at today? What was new, fresh, and exciting? So maybe that may lighten the load of, certain social pressures, because to be honest, I may not have the answer. But if I can allow this to be a safe space where you can be 7 and laugh and smile, okay, I think we can go somewhere.
Definitely.
If that helps.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Monet, can you jump on there? Like, how are we having this conversation in our middle schools and high schools? Where are these conversations happening? Because I know it's not happening in my school.
The conversations are happening, I think within any school, even unfortunately, like Ashton said, even if it's just a tolerant school and it's not an accepting school, those conversations are being had, and they're probably being had individually. Like with that one teacher that you connect with, that gets you, that understands, that you feel safe with, with that counselor or, an adult that's in a building, the conversations are being had because they're being had in my office all the time. And I'm the gatekeeper to many, secrets or things that, students are just not comfortable with talking to other people about. So, we mentioned safe space, and that's going to be something that we probably mention throughout the entire conversation here, but I try to make my office the safest place that it can be. And my experience is unique because I am part of the community, so I can speak to the students from that aspect as well. And I'm very open about, sharing my coming out story and my experiences and how, it impacted me, and just to give them some information, because everybody's story is different. Everybody's experience is different, but just to have the information and to know, that they're not the only one. Because sometimes people feel like I'm the only one thinking these things or feeling these things, and just knowing that there are other people out there, it creates community, and that's essentially what we all want. Regardless of anything, we all want to be a part of a community and to feel safe and to feel heard. So the conversations are being had, and I think that it's everyone's responsibility to participate in the conversations and to create relationships with their students where they can feel safe to be who they are and to go along the journey at the pace that they need to go along the journey.
Awesome. So I want to also talk about what is an impact or negative impact. Dr. B mentioned, suicide, and, I mentioned about depression and so forth. Dr. Goodcross, what are some of the devastating consequences of schools simply ignoring the issue and just being tolerant?
Well, I mean, the mental health ones that you just mentioned, suicide, increased depression, anxiety, are certainly big ones. But I think that one thing that's often lost is not having, a space that feels safe, or with not having authentic connections actually makes these students more vulnerable to exploitation. Makes them more likely to fall prey to like seeking community in sources that are a little bit too age progressed for them, right? And so they may be more able, or like less able to manage those sorts of situations. I can think of a few clients I've worked with over the years who've, they thought they found that one adult, but the adult was actually grooming them because the adult knew that they didn't have access to having a great relationship with parents or other people in the school. So I think it's, yes, suicide is probably the most, obviously the most severe, but depression and anxiety are there too. But more, probably more insidious is the vulnerability that the secrecy and the hiding can promote in youth.
Also, one of the things that Devin mentioned, I believe, you said greatness comes in all packages. I don't want to quote you wrong. What did you say, Devin?
Oh, greatness comes in many forms.
Many forms. Thank you. And I think one of the things too that we're missing now is making sure that our schools get the benefits of all of their students, because there's greatness in Ashton, and her school, their school benefited from Ashton being there, being a leader, being engaged. Now, what if Ashton wasn't included, wasn't engaged? Then, Ashton's life would not be a part of that school, and we wouldn't be celebrating Ashton's success. So that school would have been missing out. So that's something else that is, devastating. We want all students to bring their voice, bring their gifts and talents, and be able to be a leader in their school and feel part of the school community. And when we're not inclusive, they're going to either drop out or, be quiet in the corner, and then they're not going to develop those skills, but they'll feel engaged and a part of the community.
Can I jump in? Because I want to dig in and get in y'all business. So that's me, right? I just want, anybody can share. Has there ever been, or when has there been an opportunity that you felt like you were not seen, like Ashton said, and you felt like you weren't able to bring your light to it? How did that make you feel, and or how did you navigate that situation? Like I told you, I'm taking notes because, I'm learning as well. I don't want to be on that line anymore. I want to, educate myself. I know it's going to be a process, it's a journey, but what are some of those scenarios or that situation, I should say, that you felt like you just were not seen? And because we don't want that to happen again down the line. We want to be able to help our village people, family.
I guess I would have to say, as a very grown adult, there's not many times where I try, I'm not seen and heard because I feel, pretty confident. But I would say actually most recently in my doctoral program, I went to a small Catholic school in Pennsylvania. So knowing what I know about some of the tenets of Catholicism and how they're not always aligned with me being a member of the community, I felt, and it wasn't anything anyone did or said. It might have been a lot of my preconceived notions about the Catholic religion and all that entails. But I know that in those instances, a lot of times in classes, I would not share as much, or I did not feel as comfortable about sharing just because of that. So I think that's the most recent experience that I could think of where I kind of didn't let my light shine, or I dimmed it because of the circumstances, and I was unsure of how I would be received.
So our producer has given us a cue. I needed to ask a certain person. I'm gonna take that. So let's see. You know what, Ashton? I want to get in your business because you're recently graduated, so you're in that age group that I've connected with. So do you mind me getting in your business a little bit?
Not at all, not at all. I think overall, like I said, I've been really lucky with my school. Sorry. I think, as I said, I've been really lucky with my school for the most part. I think the biggest issues I had were when I initially came out, first in 7th or 8th grade, and then again as trans in 10th grade. I remember beginning the school year, and it was a big adjustment for my teachers to use a different name and pronouns. And I had some classes where sharing pronouns was like not a normal part of the class. And because people knew me by a different name and pronouns, it just kind of perpetuated this environment that inevitably I would get misgendered and dead named in. I don't know. I always say with introductions, that's the biggest thing that you can give to trans students and to LGBT students, to give them that space to like clarify their identity and be seen. Because I think if you don't prompt that, often we won't, because it's very intimidating because you don't know what kind of space you're in.
Wow, that was good. Dr. Goodcross, you're shaking your head. Is that some of the things that some of your clients mentioned as well?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, and myself too, right? But I think I would say what I, particularly from my trans and mostly my gender expansive folks, right? I think even within the community, there can be an erasure in the same way, like decades ago, we would say that kind of bisexual folks were erased. I think that we would say, and that still happens, but I think that we would say that for kind of our folks who are gender expansive, or we would say, someone would say non-binary, right? I think we think about trans as like Lorraine Cox or Janet Mock, but that's actually the smallest part of the community. That's not the largest part of the kind of trans and gender expansive community, right? And so what I've seen is a lot of folks can feel invisible because they have an identity that's not on the binary. It is not him or her. It is they and them, right? And I think that's really important, right? That's why I have my pronouns on my name, right? Because I think, as Ashton said, we do want to normalize like that. Just because I have a mustache and you may assume that I'm assigned male at birth, that may not be how I identify.
Right. Awesome.
I'm taking down other words. I have a lot of research to do.
Definitely. So as a teacher, I want to hear from Teresa, Dr. B. Dr. B, what advice would you give a teacher or educator when they want to just get started, if they want to make sure that they are inclusive, not only for their students, but also for the parents as well?
Yeah, I would say basic human rights, right? So respect, dignity, all of those things, making sure that you create space with autonomy. So in a lot of our assessments and when we're speaking to our kids, we don't ask the questions to allow them opportunities to say how they would like to be responded to and what questions they feel comfortable asking and what they feel comfortable sharing with their parents. And I find that in the healthcare world, a lot of these barriers are crossed without the permission of the student, without the permission of the young person. Perhaps they have not come out to their parents yet, or they don't want to disclose their gender identity at this time, and they should have the freedom to do that. So I think more respect and more autonomy, creating those spaces.
Wow. Go ahead, Dr. Goodcross.
Can I ask something too? One of the things as a parent, so I have a husband and not a wife. And so what's interesting is in filling out public forms, like it's often spaces for mother and father, right? And like, I'm actually Baba, so where do I go with that, right? So I think that that's another thing, right? Like even before you say a word, kind of your structures and forms may have let me know that I am at best atypical, at worst unwelcome in the system.
Dr. Goodcross, I think you have been reading our plans because you are all taking the steam out of us.
Right. That's going to be part of our discussion as well on Thursday. Like practical tips for how do we make sure that our school culture is inclusive of all of our learners and all of our families. So we want to get it, like you said, just a piece of paper. Then instead of saying mom and dad, just parent or guardian. Just something simple. Or, posters around the school. What does that, like you said,
How does that
you make, it makes you feel that you're atypical if you don't see yourself being represented around the school or celebrated. A prom, all the guys wear a tuxedo, all the girls need to get their dresses approved. So just simple things. So we're going to talk about that as well. So I love that you brought that up because again, we need to go there. We need to have the conversation. And I love Coach Williams. You're saying that you're taking notes. Speak to the teacher who's still nervous to say anything. They're scared to ask that question. They know that one of their students have two mothers or two dads, or they know that there's a student that wants to use the pronoun they and them, and they just don't know how to have that conversation with the student. And they're scared because, we have this thing with cancel culture where, you'll get blacklisted if you say the wrong thing. So we have those teachers who just say, you know what, I don't know what to say. I don't know what questions to ask. I'm ignorant to this whole thing and I don't know. So speak to that teacher who's like, I have my own beliefs, I have my own opinions, and now I'm being, forced to deal with something that I know nothing about. Help that teacher out, please.
Ask the question. Like Dr. B said, we talk a lot about making a safe space, and I think that is going to be for everyone. Where can these teachers who are in that box go for a safe space? And a lot of times it might be another colleague, maybe that colleague has a great professional relationship or personal relationship with another colleague. Some people might classify me as having a big mouth. I don't know. I think I'm very reserved and quiet, but I'm not scared to ask a question or send an email, or, sometimes Google has everything, and where Google stops, that's when that conversation can begin. I think it's now time. We have to stop using that as an excuse, and we have to learn. We have to be knowledgeable. And like you said, I'm sitting here now, I'm like, dang, was I doing that to my students when I had a student, I might not have felt comfortable asking the question, but now because I didn't feel comfortable, how did that student perceive that? And now I'm being more reflective. And guess what? I'm gonna own it. I think that's another piece. Own your past mistakes, and now we're moving forward. I can't wait to get into the conversation on Thursday about those tips, because sometimes, like you said, Dr. Ross, people don't know where to start. And you guys have all been so great because you're saying, start somewhere, start asking a question. Monet was saying a lot of people feel comfortable coming to her. So if somebody's watching, they work with her, go to Monet. But we're going to get all of these, we're going to get everybody's information too, so we can have that conversation that open and honest and free. But like Dr. B said, ask a question.
Yeah.
And like I say, Google it.
Right. Dr. Bill Cross, you want to jump in? Yes.
I just had, I think, and I could be wrong, right? But my experience is that the issue doesn't really come up when somebody, my experience is that gay folks, trans folks, I'm going to kind of just use that as shorthand, have had a lifetime of having to excuse microaggressions and poor behavior, right? Or even well-intentioned bad behavior, right? So my experience is not that people are ready to cancel you, right? My experience is that coming from a place of kindness and concern, most of us can I know that you didn't mean that, right? But I think there is a way in which folks are expecting ownership, right? So I love, Dr. Ross, that, there was a mistake and you said, I'm sorry, right? I think that is what we are as human beings, that is what we expect of other people. When you hurt somebody, you say, I'm sorry, right? And I think if you're having an engagement with somebody, you say, I often say, I'm old, so I might not get this right 100% of the time. What will happen when I do that? And I promise you, I'll try to make it better, right? I think what people expect and desire is to be seen and have a whole humanity, and not just have their like their identities be like, well, I can't. It's hard for me to, remember. I just don't know them, they and them. Well, but you learn things all the time. Human beings continue to learn, right? I think I don't know that that's not an excuse. I think we have a right to say, I hear you, and that is not the way the English language is constructed. But to have a relationship with me, I need you to do this thing, right? And I'm going to give you some time, but my expectation is that you meet it. You meet me there. I talked too long. I'm sorry.
No, that was good. That was good. I love that. Go ahead, Dr. B.
I think it's important to remind everyone, you don't necessarily have to be an expert, right? As a gatekeeper, just simply having some resources available. And a lot of the anxiety and strain that I see personally in my office is not necessarily from the student, it's from the parents and those adjusting, right? So having resources not only available for your student, but available for those in their lives that want to learn, that want to become knowledgeable, because that's going to affect the child's environment, how they're received at home, and the amount of support they're getting.
Love it. Go ahead, Devin.
And I know, like, coming from the elementary sector, we necessarily, on surface level, don't have such a heavy topic to deal with. But just in, like, the foundational things, I think it's very important how we talk about the titles, right? And so one thing I'd ask my kids, what do you want to be? Right on the post-it, tell me. And whatever they want to be, chef. So now I'm calling you chef, whatever you like. Chef Jones, come to the board. President so-and-so, come to the board. Grammy winner, you, what's the answer? And so just those simple practices, I think, in all honesty, now they feel comfortable. Now somebody is speaking this into existence. It starts tiny. It's so small. But imagine that seed is being planted and growing, as in affirming myself. It goes into the student being able to walk into a new environment, having a strong understanding of, I can affirm myself. Although, in third grade, I was a Grammy winner. Now it has just bloomed into something else. So, yeah.
I like it.
Love it. All right. So, Monet, I want you to jump in there because, again, and Devin mentioned, the elementary school, we don't really have to talk about some of these topics, but definitely we all have elementary, middle, and high school. We have parents coming from this community as well. And I can say this, and I've been teaching for 20 plus years, and I think it was my second or third year teaching. And I had a student, and I was still saying, your mom, your dad, I was using those type of words with this student, and the student had two mothers. And so, but I did not know. And there were a few awkward moments with the family, but then again, eventually we became best of friends, and we were fine, but it were definitely some awkward moments. So Monet, talk to us a little bit about that situation as well. Is there training for teachers? Like, we have those moments where we're at parent-teacher conferences and it's like, oh, it's two dads, or, different things, and you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah, and I think that's where people struggle with the uncomfortability, because it doesn't make you feel good. It keeps you on pins and needles, and you kind of, I guess, focus more on your words, and that kind of makes you lose focus on what it is that you are actually trying to say, because you kind of get caught up in making sure you don't mess up. But like everyone on the panel said, we don't know what we don't know. So when we ask those questions, and if you mess up, and if you genuinely feel bad, because if you hurt someone's feelings or you hurt someone, you would say naturally, oh, I'm sorry, my bad. Please correct me. Please let me know where I slipped up. So people have to be in that space initially, but unfortunately, everyone is not always in that space. They can be set in their ways and say, oh, I'm too old. I can't keep up with what's going on. And this is how I know it. And this is how it's going to be. And I've seen that with colleagues where a couple of years ago, we had a trans student, and a lot of my colleagues just could not get past the old pronouns and start using the new pronouns. And they'd be like, well, I've known this person all this time as this, and this is what they are. And I would do my best to, let's say you're not being respectful, you're not honoring who the student is. Like, it's not that difficult. If you try, it's not that difficult. It's all about whether people want to try. And what I tell students is that people need to try. Like, you deserve people trying. So if you need to call people out, obviously in the most respectful way that you can, being that, you are a student, they are an adult, but people need to be checked sometimes. And that's the only way that they are going to respect your boundaries and respect who you are. And I always want my students to know that I advocate for them and to give them the tools that they need to advocate for themselves, because that's the least that they deserve, that we all deserve.
I want to jump in because she hit advocacy. And so, Ms. Penny, I wanted you to kind of talk about, that advocacy process. Have you had to advocate for Ashton, or, how are you able to help other parents with this process?
Yep. And we were kind of just discussing this earlier. So, I mean, as an advocate, I could probably be more engaged. But, Ash asked, well, how are you an advocate? I'm like, well, whenever I'm with my friends and we're having conversations, for instance, talking about the elementary schools, one of my friends, she was saying, well, I just don't agree that they have to bring up LGBTQ in elementary school. It confuses my child. And I said, well, they're not necessarily doing it for them, but they might have friends whose parents are gay. And so, they're just trying to normalize the situation. And, elementary school, maybe you're not dealing with, a child identifying, although it can be early on, but you're creating a sense of normalcy moving forward. So that's the kind of advocacy I do. I'm very much a one-on-one. I mean, I do support the Gen Out choir, and I always look out for opportunities to particularly get Ash involved and help find community for them. But yeah, I think being an advocate is continuing conversation, and when you hear somebody saying something a little bit off, like, engage the conversation with them.
I like that. Devin, go ahead.
I think what's really interesting is that, from my experience in the elementary sector, that is actually flipped, right? So the advocacy is more on teachers than students. And we have had to, unfortunately, build up the tolerance, not acceptance, for parents to enter into the classroom of a teacher, part of the LGBTQ plus community. So I have had unfortunate situations where, back to school night, how you doing? I'm Mr. Tillman. And a parent has said, oh, you're one of them. The whole one. And so you think about, okay, let's reset. And what does that do? My thinking is, what does that do for the safe space for the child?
Right.
And so it's just interesting to see and know the switch. And, at times, how do we work with parents being accepting of those in the hands of their children, who to educate them when their administrators are part of the community, when their teachers and counselors, even staff, is a part of the community, recognizing that we're here for a safe space, we're here to do a job. But I do believe, that is something that does need to be touched on when it comes to elementary sector. It's actually, reversed for the parent.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay, you're good. I'm still angry.
I clenched my pearl. I don't even have it.
So I want to, again, another honesty moment. Okay, Dr. B, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. 20 plus years teaching, I made a few mistakes. Dr. B, I'm gonna just confess to you one of my mistakes. Because you mentioned that, with some of the ways that, teachers deal with the students, and they may want to tell a parent, I believe it was Dr. B, tell the parent before the child had an opportunity to come out to their parents, right? I believe that you mentioned that, right? So I had a situation where a student and we had a really close relationship. And I looped with her as her administrator So I had a close relationship with her for 2 years. And she came to me for everything. And it was one situation where she was getting in trouble, and I had to contact her parent. And the thing that she did that was wrong was included her girlfriend. And she didn't say it was my girlfriend, but it was like someone I like or I'm dating. I can't remember what the label was. But I told her, I'm going to tell your mother. And she said, well, you're only doing that because I'm gay. That broke my heart. Because again, I didn't think that I was treating her any differently. And so I had to really reflect of like, am I treating her differently? Is this a normal consequence for that behavior? Would I have called the parent if she wasn't gay? So talk to me about that, because I had to call the parent. And I did try to describe the situation without getting too much information. So help me with that.
Okay.
Make me feel better about my issue.
There has to be natural consequences, and no matter how you identify, you cannot make that child an exception, right? Because of that. But it seems like you took the precautions to shield the information that she did not want to disclose, but you provided the appropriate behavior. So you guys are well versed in behavior modification, I'm sure. And so we have to have those consequences and those reinforcers. It sounds like you did that. But if there's an uncomfortable conversation that needs to be had, I normally empower the student to speak those words themselves. So standing behind them, providing the support and empowering them to use their voice to have that difficult conversation with their guardian.
Love it. Okay. Next time.
It make you feel better?
Yes. Because it broke my heart, because I tried to care for care about all of my students. I love all of my students regardless of how they identify. And so when she said that, it was like,
she knew that. She knew she's trying to run game. I see it.
She was hoping I would let it go. Okay. But anyway, so I want, again, Devin, thank you so much for sharing, your experiences. So I want everyone to kind of give us your final thoughts. What we talked about, what we want our takeaway to be, but what are your final thoughts about our topic?
Final, like we ended?
Yeah, we got to end eventually.
Okay, sorry.
Got this. All right. So Dr. Goodcross, we'll start with you. What are some of your final thoughts for our topic?
I would say that the problem that I see, and I said this before, is that people have a hard time seeing the humanity in the other, right? And people most often choose not to be uncomfortable, right? So if I'm able to see your whole personhood, right? If I'm able to see that you identify as non-binary, then I have to question what do I believe about the gender binary, and what do I believe, and what does that mean about my relationship? And I think people choose not to have those conversations with themselves, and so they shut everything else down, right? Because it is uncomfortable for them. So I think, and that there is some natural tendency that we don't tend to move towards things that are hurtful to us. But I guess my thought, or my last piece, is that most people would not have the same reaction to any other aspect of identity. Let's just take race out of it, because that's something else. But let's just talk about ability status, right? Or let's just talk about socioeconomic position, or like most people would not have the same sort of reaction, right? Because there's not a moral failing associated with being differently abled, right? But there is still some of that verbiage and some of that mindset when we look at these communities. So I took too long, so sorry, but that's what I have to say.
No, that's good. That's good. Good stuff. Dr. B.
Oh gosh, there was so much good stuff we talked about today.
I know, right?
It's a lot, but I guess final words, I think, let's just put all this education and knowledge and cultural competency into action, and let's model the behavior we want to see for those around us in our community. It starts with just our behavior. If we can respond differently, if we can give words of encouragement, if we can create those spaces, others will follow. Okay, so let's just try to do better tomorrow.
Got it. Monet.
I would say that I think if many people look at young people as their own child, and I mean, that's how I look at the kids that I work with. I think about my own son and how I would want people to treat him and how I would want people to love up on him. Because when we love up on young people and support young people, they go out into the world and do the same, and it makes the world a better place. Like, no matter how corny that sounds, like when we love each other, we are nice to each other, and it just takes that to make the world a better place. So I think that's the most important thing. Just love on each other.
Definitely. And Devin.
Oh, I just have to piggyback on Dr. Monet. That was great. I just think that is just everything. My takeaway is that I'm grateful for the questions and the answers, and more questions to be answered. And so that's my biggest takeaway when it comes to this. Have a willingness, understand that greatness comes in many forms. And yeah.
Love it.
Yep. And I just think, I mean, my takeaway is I'm glad that these conversations are happening. More and more conversations need to happen. And, you know, whoever's watching today might start another conversation with someone else. And do you want to add anything?
Yeah. Big takeaways. The importance of visibility in schools and the importance of making space for conversations. Yeah.
Love it. Well, we definitely appreciate all of our panelists today. Like Coach Williams said, we're learning. You know, we're learning from you guys because we're open and willing to do better. And we love all of our students, and we want to make sure that we're learning and growing, because this is a journey, and we want to make sure that we're doing whatever it takes to make sure that we are providing an inclusive, safe place for all of our students. So Village, I hope you guys come back on Thursday when we talk about part 2 of promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion, the LGBT plus edition. Because we want to make sure that we are specific, that we're not just tolerant, but we are accepting.
Yes.
And I think Monet said it better. We just need to love.
We just need to love each other.
And make the world a better place.
But I should sing.
Don't say. All right, so come back on Thursday because we're going to talk about practical tips. Now, today we just laid the groundwork. Now we know why it's so important that we have this conversation, right? And we know the devastation that it can have if we ignore the topic, if we ignore those students who are in that community or our families. We want to make sure that everyone feels a part of our school community. So we're going to give some practical tips of what teachers and schools can do in order to start the conversation. So
more notes.
All right. So join us on Thursday right here at the Village LG on Facebook. And you can also check us out on Instagram to follow us. Okay, don't forget to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And we appreciate all of our supporters. Thank you for sharing. This is a video to definitely share.
Yes.
This is one to share, I think. Share. Again, guys, thank you so much. And again, teacher leadership is a mindset, not a position. See you on Thursday.